about how bad the services now are, including that the NHS is now some 15 years behind the private sector in its use of tech, and that patient care is held back by outdated IT, and that the NHS has failed to use modern computing to reshape how people are treated. If you work in the NHS, just how bad is the IT? Sean Phillips is Head of Health and Social Care at Policy Exchange. Thanks for coming on, Mr. Phillips. I don't think it is a surprise to many people who need the NHS, use the NHS, or indeed work in the NHS that the tech is so bad. But why is it this far behind, do you think?
Well, good afternoon. It's really, really good to join you. And I think that Lord Darzi's review tomorrow will feel like a cold shower and a pretty sober diagnostic of the state of the NHS more broadly. I think when it comes to this question of the way in which tech is used in the NHS and how we've got far behind, I think the first to say is that this is absolutely, as you say, something that everybody's recognised. If I think back to Jeremy Hunt, called for a paper-free NHS and set a target for that. If I think about Matt Hancock, set up NHS X, which was meant to be this agency that really focused on how you could spread and scale tech more effectively. And then Sajid Javid talking about how we could use the NHS app more effectively. So this ambition that the new Health Secretary has to turn the NHS from something which focuses on analog to digital is a long-standing commitment. The big question is going to be how much insight is there from Lord Darzi's review around actually what we can fundamentally do. If I think about the work that we've been doing at Policy Exchange, whether that is on general practice or thinking about how we deliver vaccines more effectively in the community, we have heard really consistently about some really fundamental challenges in meeting probably the number one thing really that the new government wants to do, which is thinking about how you can expand care closer to home, that move of shifting care kind of into the community. We heard from professionals who were doing immunisation in schools, having to record on Excel and then having to have other colleagues then digitise immunisation record. I spoke the other day to a manager who they were talking about using Excel spreadsheets to organise clinical home care services where medicines are delivered to people in their homes. So the challenges are really real. The way I see it is I think there are three big issues that need to be dealt with. The first is around management capability in the NHS. So fundamentally, if you are a data scientist or somebody who has some of the types of skills that we need, either expertise in analytics or in actually implementing some of these systems we want to see, fundamentally the private sector is more attractive because of the salaries. So Patricia Hewitt, former Health Secretary, did a review, and one of her recommendations was, could you shift and have a different way of approaching the pay bands so we encourage and have the incentive for people to stay? That might be one thing that the government think about. I mean, from my perspective, I do think having more flexibility for NHS organisations to be able to recruit what they know that they need and the expertise they need will be useful. Secondly, and this is a big thing, and it'll be interesting to see how much is covered in Darzi's review, is around the capital budget. We either underspend or don't maximise the use of the capital budget, and that creates all kinds of challenges for trust, because we have this sort of mad situation where we want to be able to invest either in the premises or, as you say, the tech, but often we find ourselves unable to do so. So thinking about how we can get out of that cycle where we don't use that budget effectively and kind of whether the Treasury need to take a new approach, I think is a really fundamental question. And finally, and this is something that Policy Exchange again have looked at, and we've proposed a digital health and care bill, because one of the things also that's quite challenging here around data sharing and fundamentally sort of who is responsible and who owns data. We think there's a strong case to introduce changes in the legislation so we really clarify that, because at the moment, for instance, we place enormous burdens upon P's in terms of responsibility. Well,
Sean, it's very interesting to hear your diagnosis of it. Just very finally, you mentioned the Hewitt review, you mentioned the Darzi review. It seems, I think, that we're well aware, people are now well aware of what the problems are, and actually what isn't needed necessarily is a big all-encompassing review or royal commission into the NHS, as people keep calling for. Now we've got to see some actual change and solutions here.
I would agree. And perhaps the chain isn't going to be broken in the way that you want. This review from Lord Darzi, published tomorrow, is going to be an important factor in determining the approach that the new government is taking to a 10-year review that they are doing. So my expectation and what I would urge is really to ensure that review that the Department of Health and Social Care are doing, which is looking at not just the NHS. My understanding is it's looking at kind of health more broadly and what we do to improve the health of the nation, actually really does come forward with a comprehensive theory of change and actually the policy levers. And this is going to require some tough political choices about where we choose to spend. Some people are going to lose out, whether that's other departments or whether that's other bits of the NHS. But that is ultimately the position we're in. So let's see the decisions that are made.
And let's see what the review has to say tomorrow when it's published. Sean, thanks very much indeed. Sean Phillips, Head of Health and Social Care Policy at Policy Exchange. If you